A few years ago, I managed to do something I thought would be impossible as a millennial. I bought my own flat. I worked long hours, scrimped and saved, and eventually managed to put down a deposit and get a mortgage on a house with my fiancé, Ryan. The day we signed the contract was such a proud day for us. It's a lovely little 2-bedroom, semi-detached house in a Yorkshire village. It kind of feels like a dream. Or at least, it did. We knew the mortgage repayments would be tight, but when we had to pay out for some unexpected roof repairs one stormy week in winter, we realised we were going to be way over budget. So we talked about getting a lodger for a few years until we were back on our feet and able to pay it back ourselves. We were reluctant, but we knew it would be short term, so we agreed and put out some advertisements on various websites. Being a fairly remote area, we didn't get much interest, but about a month later, we got a message from a girl around our age called Natalie. She was moving to the area for 6 months to cover a maternity position in the next town along. We exchanged messages and had a Zoom call with her before accepting her application. She seemed friendly and, for want of a better word, normal. I was looking forward to meeting her. The following week, Natalie arrived at our house and we greeted her at the door. She stepped out of the car, her dark hair being whipped around her face as she opened the boot. We moved in to greet her and help her unload the car, but she only had a medium-sized suitcase. "You're a light packer then?" I joked. She smiled and said that she had no need for unnecessary material belongings. I chuckled nervously as my fiancé gave me a quizzical look. It was a strange thing to say, sure, but it did mean she wouldn't leave stuff lying all around the house, so I didn't mind. We gave her a tour of the house. She didn't say much, but seemed to be taking in every inch of the property. We finished the tour in the kitchen, where I had some homemade muffins laid out ready for her. She couldn't eat those, she told me. Allergies. Then, without excusing herself, she turned around and left the kitchen. Ryan and I looked at each other and began giggling as quietly as we could. I think we had the wrong impression of what we were expecting. We'd had in our minds the idea of having a lodger who would join us in taking turns to cook, would share a bottle of wine with us at the weekend, and maybe even become our friends. Maybe she was just shy. I didn't really see Natalie much over the next few weeks. She would leave the house before we woke up and would arrive back and spend the evening alone in her room. I mentioned this to Ryan and was surprised to learn that he'd had loads of conversations with her. A silly, jealous feeling bubbled in my stomach. Was I just unlikable? I made an effort to talk to her over the next few weeks, determined to show that I was a nice person. But she always seemed to be in a rush to leave or tired from a long day at work. I was disgruntled, as I would overhear her sharing a joke with Ryan. I shared my annoyance with him, but he just told me I was being paranoid. I did start to get suspicious after a while, though. Ryan was becoming withdrawn and secretive, hiding his phone whenever he got a text and leaving the room to answer his phone. As the months wore on, I was convinced they were having an affair. I felt stupid, embarrassed, and being in such an isolated area just made everything feel so much worse. I confronted Ryan about it. I expected him to get angry, but he just sighed a weary sigh and told me that Natalie had made a pass at him. He'd pushed her away and asked her to leave by the end of the week, but she never left. He didn't want to upset me, which is why he hadn't told me. I was furious and ordered him to kick her out. It wasn't a pretty scene. She screamed and cried and told me that my fiancé didn't really love me, that he was meant to be with her, not me. She looked wild, deranged. As she drove away, blaring her horn down the country road, Ryan held me tight as it started to rain. He told me how sorry he was, and that maybe we should leave it a while before we got another lodger. I agreed, wholeheartedly. Ryan was so loving over the following week. It was as if he was trying to make up for putting me through the whole Natalie situation. I was feeling weak and vulnerable, and just wanted to put the whole thing behind me. But that's when things started to get worse. I was getting ready to go to work one morning when I opened my wardrobe to find all my clothes off the hangers in a heap on the floor. Confused, I started to pick them up to put them on the bed, when I realised they were all cut to pieces. Every last piece of clothing was slashed and torn. I ran to Ryan and told him what had happened. They weren't like that when I went to bed the night before, so whoever had done it had been in our room whilst we had slept. The only person I could think could do this, was Natalie. Naturally, we called the police and told them everything. They said they would look into it. We changed the locks on all the doors, just to be on the safe side. A few days later, I was in the shower when I stepped out to grab a new bottle of shampoo. Something odd caught my eye, but in that split second my brain didn't register what it was, so I just shook my head and continued to wash my hair. When I stepped out to dry myself a little later, I realised what I'd seen. On the mirror, drawn into the steam with a finger, was a message. "He's mine." I screamed and ran into the bedroom to find Ryan. He held me tight and rocked me until I calmed down. When I could speak, I told him what had happened. He looked for himself, and when he returned, he had a determined look on his face. He told me to pack a bag as we were staying in a hotel for a while until the crazy bitch was caught. We called the police en route, and they told us they were going to go and find and arrest Natalie. When we checked into the hotel, I sighed relief. I felt safe for the first time in weeks. Ryan was my shadow for the rest of the evening, and held me tight into him as we fell asleep that night. I woke up around 2 a.m. with a jolt. Something had smashed in the bathroom. Someone was in our room. Ryan leapt out of bed and ran in there. I sat with the covers pulled up to my eyes, too frightened to do anything. But there was only silence. Then a small thud. "Ryan?" More silence. Then footsteps. High-heeled footsteps. Natalie emerged from the bathroom. Her hair was wild and she looked like she hadn't slept for weeks. Her skin was yellow and waxed and she had a maniacal look in her eye. "Natalie? Where is Ryan?" I whimpered. "He's mine, bitch," she spat and held up a bloodied axe. "You should have just let me have him."